that moment of here and now and the fleetingness of life and the way it works, an acceptance of that would be a great step forward if we would have that more in management team meetings or in strategy planning.
Hello and welcome back to a new show. This is the Days of Change podcast, and my name is Holger Nauheimer. In case this is your first time to listening in, you can expect very personal conversations with people who are passionate about change and who help individuals and organizations which intend to respond to their calling. Today, we will talk about the role of art in transformation processes and about the not knowing in messy situations. With me will be Jouke Kruijer, who has been a friend and cherished colleague of mine for a long time. I guess we met about 12 years ago, and since then we have been together on multiple occasions. We co-facilitated more than 10 workshops together, and Jouke's facilitation of the Berlin Change Days learning journey 3 years ago is still unforgotten. Jouke calls himself a hybrid professional. And when you go to his website, I'll put the link into the show notes, which you find at changedays.com/podcast. So when you go to his website, the first you'll see is artwork, because he is a gifted painter. I really love his abstract style. It's very unique. He paints beautiful canvases. Jouke is also an actor and a teacher of improv theater, and he is a systemic management consultant. He describes himself in the following words, quote, "Curiosity and a deep need to learn and teach have guided me on my life path. My energy has been used towards reconciling ambition, freedom, and responsibility. This has become me, the hybrid professional, artist, and executive coach. Open to the joy of experiencing life and working to create consciousness within and between people." Unquote. Jouke lives in Amsterdam with his wonderful wife, who I need to invite to this show on another occasion. Hey, Jouke, welcome to the show. It's great to having you as my guest today. I always enjoyed chatting with you.
Hey, Holger, you created a big smile already in your introduction, Holger, on my face. So that was great. That was a good introduction.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Jouke, over the years, we had so many great conversations, some of them over a beer or a bottle of wine. So why don't we pick it up from there? Do you remember that one Dutch or Belgian beer we had in Amsterdam? The name was, what was it? Mooi en meedogenloos, which means beautiful and relentless. And I remember it was an imperial stout with more than 12% alcohol.
I remember that very vividly, Holger. as much as you can remember that after the beer like that, huh?
What did we possibly talk about that evening?
I have no remembrance of that, but what we usually talk about is our passion for this work. Huh? I think that is what brings us together always. The relentlessness created the giggle,
yes,
as we said on the bar, because I think we're both a little bit relentless in terms of what we encounter in our working lives and in our own lives, and sometimes things are relentless to us, and sometimes, we're also a little relentless to systems and things that we think should change, because we both have this passion for sustainable change, things that will really make a difference, and I think so that created the relentlessness created a giggle on our
yes, and the beauty, of course, as well, the dark beauty. And I remember it was a summer evening in Amsterdam, and I had my suitcase on your bike in front of it, and you had your wife at the back on your bike on the rack, and it was funny. Jouke, for being a close friend, I know little about your very early life. Kind of, it seems that my knowledge of your life starts we met 10, 15 years ago. So if we look into your two main professions with which you make your living, that of management consultancy and that of a painter, how and when did you get into those? And what were you before you got into either of the two? And was there any childhood experience that indicated you would go this path?
That's a nice question, actually, which has been, I've been concerned with, because I'm asking these questions myself at this moment, also trying to make sense a little bit about my life and what I've done so far and where it needs to go. So an very early childhood memory is when I was at school for my first day. I didn't go to nursery school, so I went straight into my primary school, and I was about 6 or so. And on the very first day, the teacher in front of us, she held up little cards with what I recognized as letters, but I thought it was a little game that she played. So she asked, what does it say here? And so I readily raised my finger. I said, book. And she said, no. I said, okay. And then, so she put it on a book, on a book in the classroom. And then she said, what's on here? And I said, chair. She said, no.
Mm-hmm.
And so she put it on a chair. And I thought, well, wait a minute, what's this game? I thought it was a game, and other children were able to, and then she raised another one. She said, and somebody else raised his finger. It said window. She said, right, window. And I thought, how can that person, how can my, that little girl know what it says on the cards? I thought it was a little game, but it wasn't. It was about knowing. It was about, reading and stuff. And I hadn't been to nursery school, so I couldn't read, or had no idea. So I have a very, very early memory of play and being sort of frustrated that play isn't enough. You've got to know something. There's stuff that and I had a sense of I was behind. That was really painful, and I think throughout my life that's been a pattern that has been repeated, and it was always to do with I know certain stuff like play or draw or being a little creative boy, and there was always this sense of other people know things that are important. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So then I went to secondary school, and I have a vivid memory of moment there too. We had to go in front of the class and do a presentation live before the class.
Right.
Set pieces that you have to tell a little story about, do a little research presentation. I was about 12. I was so nervous. I was just extremely nervous. We didn't have books in our house, so my father, I was raised in a nursery. My father grew roses, so that's where I grew up. So in agricultural surroundings, and we didn't have many books. So the only books that we had were Reader's Digest that came in monthly.
We had yeah.
I found a subject of what's that? I don't know the word in English. What's that Australian mammal that's got a beak like a duck and a tail, and it's a mammal, but it looks like a duck.
Idea. I know.
Yeah. Anyway, big article about that. And I thought that might be interesting. So I did that, and I sort of managed to go. I was so incredibly nervous, and I was relieved for half a day, and then I thought, oh dear, next year I'm gonna have to do this again. Oh, and I was already getting pain in my stomach, and it was so hard for me to stand in front of a group of children. I thought, I can't live. This has got to change. So I got into theater and I got into acting, and I think at the last 2 years of secondary school, I was in the school play. I had the lead in the school play. So I really overcame the pain of being alive almost, and having to work in school and having to stand up and show whatever I knew. I overcame that by really addressing my fears. And so I was quite a courageous little boy. Looking back, that was really, that were really two important moments.
So that was the acting. And when did you start painting or drawing? Already as a kid? When did you get into the professional part of painting?
Actually, my brother and sister were much older, so I was alone in that, around the house. I was very much alone. And the thing that I used to do was draw and paint and stuff. So I have early photographs. I was about 5 or 6, sitting outside and drawing. So I think that's been always with me. And the acting came more of a like a survival.
A need,
a need to do. Otherwise, But the painting was always like my refuge.
And then later, obviously, you never studied arts, did you, or did you study arts?
No, but I took many classes, but I never went to art school, and I never went to a drama school either. Actually, I took lots of lessons and courses and stuff, but I didn't get into drama school.
Yeah. So the listeners might go to your website afterwards, which, as I said, I put onto our website and see your beautiful art, which I love. It's really good. And well, to describe it in a few words, your style is mainly abstract. But I would say there are 2 main lines, as I can see: nudes and all the other stuff. So about how much? 50-60% of your canvases are nudes. And obviously you once worked with a guy called Peter Schenk. I tried to Google him, but I just found a Baroque painter named Peter Schenk and not the recent one. But he describes your art as when Jouke paints, he's making love to his canvases. Passion, tenderness, color, and strength is an alternating rhythm. Form becomes fluid and solidifies in his paint, and so on and so on. Is that a good description?
It is a good description, because it was very. I was very interested in the intimacy of the contact that I have as a painter with the nude model. So that was important to my work. Find the intimacy and transfer that onto paper. And find the intimacy with the paper and the paint and the stuff that I work with in relation, to what is being made on the paper. And so a lot of it is about intimacy.
What did that make to you as a human being, this experience of intimacy?
I think it has to do with being very much alone when I was a kid and wanting, physical contact. I was a cuddly kind of boy, but there was not much to cuddle when I was young. So me, man. I hug people all the time.
Sure.
I'm really huggable. I hug my clients, and it's almost a disgrace. But I just do it so naturally, and I get away with it. But I think intimacy is and I think also in the world, it is a really strange thing that intimacy is not so much valued anymore, and it's a little suspicious. You have in the States, you have these, have the Me Too stuff, but you also have kids, at school being banned. I saw banned from school because they put an arm around their friend and stuff like that. So intimacy is a real concern. I think it's important.
And that's an interesting point, and I think we should go a little bit deeper into it, because we both share the idea of how trust is being created, and we both know, and I learned that from you at the end in the model of David Meister, that intimacy is one important element of trust or trust building. Now, if I think about the relationship between a painter and his nude model, and maybe we can also transfer that to the relationship between a consultant and their clients. And you said you hug clients. I do that sometimes. Well, I wait whether the clients hug me first or so. But depends on. But as far as I know, or I believe, is a painter, particularly a painter of nudes, needs to also keep a certain distance. I mean, you can't. I don't know about you. Well, I know a little bit about you, but I don't want to assume you can't get too intimate with your models, isn't it? And what does that say to the relationship to clients?
I'll give a simple answer, maybe.
Okay.
So I think where the art comes from is from sublimation of that intimacy. So I can't hug the model. Obviously, she's nude. I won't go to her. But what happens is that I transfer that to the delicacy that I use my brush. And if you look at my paintings, I think you could say that it's quite lyrical and it's soft and it's got a little bit of that dance with intimacy, but it is between my brushes and the paper. So it's sublimated the intimacy between the two people in my studio, and it comes together in the art. And I think if that is a metaphor for my work in organizations, I'm always looking for a meeting point. It's always, where do you meet? What is the communicative space that is important to establish so that you can have meaningful conversations, you can have courageous conversations, you can have things are being said that are normally, that are unspeakable. And I think that's what I try to aim for in my organizational work. Create opportunities to be intimate by creating a space or a setting where the unspeakable can be voiced, where your fears and your stuff that is difficult to talk about in this very much rationalized settings get silenced.
Yeah, that's interesting what you're saying. And I had a conversation in my last podcast with Daryl Connor where we also talked about the same subject, also about the transparency and the courage of a consultant to speak the truth. And this is something I'm really not struggling with, but this is one of my topics nowadays. How can you speak the truth and be true to your conviction, and at the same time not break the relationship with the client? Because sometimes you have to say things which the client might not like to hear, or ask questions in the way that the client uncovers things that they don't want to hear. And so how do you do that? And probably it's difficult to describe, but maybe you have a recipe without breaking the trust.
I don't do it all the time, but sometimes it is fitting to play with art, either poetry or even dance or painting or acting. You get into a arena where we know things about like when we were children. It is beyond prejudice. It is beyond good or not good. And I think at that moment, people are becoming a little freer to be truthful. Mm-hmm. So just to give an example, a few years ago, it's still a very big client that we work with. The whole process that we started this, I started to make a collaborative painting with them. And what I saw happening is that everybody was sort of equal, and they used that experience to speak more openly, maybe, about how they show up to each other, how they talk about things that matter. And that puts me in a position, coming back to your question, that puts me in a position to also talk about how, my fears, how I, if I introduce my painting workshop, I tell a little bit about how I show up as a painter, how that is difficult sometimes in organizational context. And it becomes it makes it legitimate to be different.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to be authentic.
Yeah, authentic, right? And different, and
vulnerable. And I keep talking about Brené Brown in this
absolutely.
podcast. Just recently, again with Daryl Connor, because she gave us the language for things probably we wanted to express, or we did express already, showing up as human beings. And I know you do that. And I do that. So we show all our sides, maybe not all our sides, but many of our sides. And when we work together or when we work with clients, we allow ourselves to be vulnerable.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think in our work, as an artist, I think it is important to start with your experience. So with me in my studio, the experience of having a nude model in front of me is really an experience, that I can work from. But also in my organizational work, when people start in a workshop setting, have an experience of how it is to be together, even just sitting in a circle, or having a round of how do you show up this morning, there is this change coming over the group, almost like it is different from outside that room. And I think what is important in our work is that we stay with that experience instead of just going to do the work, or getting things done, and the tendency is so much all the time to speed things up, to go fast, to make things happen, to do this and to solve that. And I think that is not going to help us, because the problems are really ambiguous. The stuff that we need to work with is really complex. You cannot know, you can't know this. Otherwise it would have been easy to, we wouldn't be in this trouble that we are. So just the be in a place where you don't actually know is really vulnerable. And to stay with that and to see each other struggle is maybe the best thing that you can actually do in an organization, to facilitate, to have that happen, to have that in the room as long as possible.
Yeah, and I hope your last remarks weren't a reference to my style, because I know that sometimes I also want to get stuff done. I struggle between the both. I just had the experience recently, 2-3 weeks ago, experiences, from working with me, that yes, I think it is very, very important to focus on what's happening in the room. And I also see then sometimes that there are certain things which might or might not, I don't know, need to be done. Yeah.
Of course, Holger, that is absolutely true. It is. I'm not saying that is not important. It is really important to be practical, to make it concrete, to have things done. But I think the doing is privileged over the not doing. The seen is privileged over the unseen. The words are privileged over the silence, and all that stuff. It needs a little bit more of the stuff that we as artists play with and need to work with.
My other concern, which I'm having since I'm in this profession, is, okay, you succeed to create an atmosphere of openness and vulnerability in a workshop setting. And then what? People go back. Maybe you have been together for a day or for 2 days, sometimes even for 5 days, but that's very rare in organizations. So then people go back. So my challenge, and I think I still haven't solved it, is how to plant the seed of sustainability in a workshop, and particularly when this is an assignment, which unfortunately we do have from time to time, where you just show up as a facilitator for these 1 or 2 days, and then you send the people back to their organization, and we know exactly what happens the next day, don't we?
It's very unfortunate that we have this way of learning in organizational development. That's we still have the paradigm that you need to go somewhere for 2 days, and then you pick up something, and then you go back to your workplace, and then it's a unfortunate paradigm. We work with this, but we know that it's not really working. So some things change, but maybe at that moment a lot changes. But then when you come back, things go back into the old, fall back into the old pattern very easily, and people have a memory of how it was, but not so much are able to embody in the workplace what they have experienced. So with me, I think I go for more like my role is changing from facilitation to, walking around as an artist in residence kind of jobs where you walk around and you have conversations, and it's almost pastoral work. It's almost like but that is so it is around communities that are being sort of led in all sorts of ways, like maybe rational, maybe spiritual, maybe. So I believe much more in that model. So I'm really with you about the 2 days, and I don't have a solution for that, because I think it's just in the setting that is bound to happen. I don't think you can change the 2 days much in terms of what you do to create a sustainable change. I think the whole thing needs to be different.
I find it tragic quite often because if we're good and it happens, I would say the older and more experienced we get, the more it happens. We can create something in those 2 days. And then there's a certain happiness at the end, obviously, a certain lightness, a certain enthusiasm. And there's also a certain sadness that you leave the group and they are getting back to the issues. But let's not go to that so deep. I would like really to touch a bit on your professional career as a consultant. So when did that start? And can you remember your first assignments? Let me tell you about my first assignment. I can remember. It was such a failure. One of my first, if not the first assignment as a freelancer was in 1991 when I was sent to Mongolia. And God, I was so naive. I mean, I can confess now that I designed a multi-million EU development project, which afterwards totally failed. So I know that I'm responsible for a couple of million of euro being put into the sand. I learned then later on. So do you remember your first assignments?
Yes, I do actually. I had a sort of a bleak entrance into this world because I was in the middle of at the beginning of my acting career, and one of my colleague actors said, "Now, there's this thing around where, as an actor, you can be asked to do a sort of improvisation with for instance, a policeman who's fining you for driving your bicycle without the headlights or something. And it's a kind of training situation, and you just improvise how you would react in real life, and then it is filmed, and the trainer explains what has happened and how it could be different, and you do another improvisation, and then the policeman is informed about alternatives to behave, and then you react to how he is to his changed behavior, and then it's all an improvisation, and it's all sort of fun. And I said, okay, maybe I can do that, and I did, and I was sort of intrigued by having to be in a situation and also looking sort of from a meta level to what was happening between me, the bike rider, and the policeman, and observe what was happening, and also be in the scene at the same time. I thought that was interesting. I was good at that, actually. I was more of a thinking actor, which is not always useful on the stage in improvisation. So I was not so good an actor. Otherwise, we either wouldn't have this conversation. I would be, I'd be world famous and be in Hollywood or something. So I had a talent for that. So the playfulness around that corporate learning experience was my entrance into into organizational change development kind of thing.
Yeah, and obviously incorporating improv theater has become quite a fashion into organizational work. I do that a lot. We had a wonderful podcast some months ago with Belina Raffi, who does that all the time. But what I'm interested in particularly is how you incorporate art into your work as a consultant. And obviously I have some experience because we facilitated workshops together. So how do you do that? What you do is just magic. So you bring 100, 200, and I know you've done it with 500 people together, and you let them paint. And actually everybody paints. That's the first surprise. Everybody paints. And then you let them put a piece of art together. Can you briefly describe the process, please?
Yes, it's actually, I start with the first question: who wants to do this? And not many people raise their hands. And I ask, okay, if you would be 5-year-olds, who would raise their hands? And everybody raises their hands. So I think that, so the first question is, can you maybe go back to who you were and what you trusted when you were 5 years old? And I explained that really what is helpful is that you just trust your hand and that it will come. You know, the painting is already there, and the only thing needed is your hand and a brush, or you know, and it will just you'll just be guided. Because what people freak out about is that they have to make something. That it has to be good, and it has to be, you know, it'll be judged. I think that first opening is liberating people from, you know, I can just do it. So that's the first thing. And I ask them to make a collective ground painting. So, you know, they go and work on a long stretch of rice paper and make a painting there. And I guide them through the next phase where they make small canvases with that groundwork that they've created collaboratively, and make small canvases individually. And then the last phase is that all these canvases on the floor, and the question is to the whole group, like the 500 people or the 500 people or 100 people in the room, make this into a cohesive whole in silence. So then you see all sorts of stuff happening. What's happening in group? You know, there's the ones that go first. There's the ones that withdraw. There's the ones that start to think. The magic about that particular last phase is you see sometimes a ripple of innovation.
Yeah, and what I saw at that and at other occasions is a perfect piece of collaboration. And that brings me to a point, maybe one of the last points I want to discuss with you is the issue of collaboration, which is, as you know, at my heart, I'm all about collaboration. And for me, it's a big mystery. If you look at how difficult it is in so many organizations, if not most, that people collaborate well with each other. I mean, how much do we struggle in creating effective teams? I mean, with all the psychology I studied over time, I cannot come up with some rational explanations, but it seems that the human species is the only one in the animal kingdom which cannot collaborate very well. I mean, of course, in wolf packs or lion packs or so, there are also fights around power. But I mean, in this massive amount as we have it in organizations, that people, also individuals, even powerless people, fight with each other. Do you have any rational explanation why people struggle so much in organization to collaborating with each other?
That's a very good question. I think even asking me for a rational explanation, I think maybe that's pointing to why we find it so difficult, because we conceptualize so much. And I think in conceptualizing together, there is only a small dimension of reality that we collaborate on. So if we make things understandable, I think most of us stop there. If we can all understand this, we are ready. But that is not the way it works. That is not the way organisms work. That is not the way wolves work. You know, there is their whole body. There is their their fears, their hunger, their desires, all that stuff is also necessary. And I think what really prevents us from collaborating is that we stop when we think we all get it. Because if you just get it, that is maybe not what it is, because we get all sorts of things. You get it your way, somebody else gets it his way or her way, and what we get is not it. What we get is how we react to each other. And the whole thing about collaboration is that it's relational. It is not intellectual. So it is with people seeing each other, feeling each other, going to their inner, whatever it is, inner workings. And also, Holger, that when that happens, there is the magic in the room. When people talk about their fears, or they can express it in some way, that the collaboration spirit is there. But it is not in the head. It is in the rest.
No, I'm absolutely with you, and it's going back to what we talked about earlier about that experience in the room, which can seem transformational or can be transformational in the moment, and of course it doesn't transform the organization. But I don't want to pick that conversation up again, because we talked about it at length. Yes. So what you are arguing or what you are advocating is much more experience than rationalizing in the work with people.
Yes, I think so. I think if people get a sense of reality is fleeting, it's like the weather almost. It's gone. It's here now, and it's gone tomorrow. It'll be different. Like this conversation, like this group, how it shows up will be different all the time. If we stop trying to fix this and make it and rationalize it, but if we can just accept that it will be different all the time, then I think we make less mistakes that people are sort of marginalized, or that some things don't count. That moment of here and now and the fleetingness of life and the way it works, an acceptance of that would be a great step forward if we would have that more in management team meetings or in strategy planning.
Jouke, you have been to the Berlin Change Days multiple times. You have been facilitating the entire group. You have given workshops, so you know the spirit very, very well. How would you describe to an outsider the Berlin Change Days experience, and what is your take on it?
I think it is such a sympathetic convention. It is open, anybody who is new can be there and stay there and be there for a few hours and think, I have arrived, I am welcome. And for those that have been, coming there for years, it is a meeting with friends. And so it's a very social occasion. And that's only one aspect. And I think also in terms of content, I think you succeed in making it always a little edgy, or you and your team, or everybody it's a little edgy. It's always on the edge of something, and it's always incorporating what is coming. There's always something, around blockchains or about disruption or about, there's always this thing of, oh, that's nice, I picked that up.
Thank you. That's a nice and fair description. Jouke, I think we picked it up from the beer in Amsterdam. That was a really nice conversation. Thank you so much for taking that time, and we should do that more often. It's always great talking to you.
Thanks, Holger. Thanks very much for inviting me into this podcast. It's been a real pleasure.